Am I missing something? Is this not the same place that pays its service staff so little they have to depend on tips? Yep, you're right. Quick question. On average, how much disposable income does the average person in your country have? And that might be a little bit difficult to ask depending on where you reside in Europe, but it's a very valid question because there was an American that made an interesting assumption that kind of ties into a video we made a few days ago. Now, if you guys have been watching this channel for a little bit, we made a video a couple of days ago talking about this one American that was absolutely mind blown of the simple fact that Europeans are able to have 4 weeks paid vacation annually, depending on where they reside within Europe. And it's not a benefit, it's a right. And I did not know that. And people were like, stop calling them benefits. They're rights, James, they're rights. And I am still mind blown. I'm still mind blown because typically when I hear of paid time off, that's more of a benefit in the corporate world in the United States. And I never thought that that was a worker's right at all. I'm like, oh, okay, like that's a bonus. Now in that video, I covered 2 different sides of that topic. I said, okay, Americans are mind blown because they had these 4 weeks of paid time off, but they were also mind blown at the amount of money that people were able to save to take these 4 weeks off for the World Cup. And it just could not cross our minds. Now we dived into the initial point and not necessarily the latter. And that's what we're gonna be diving into in this video, because what this American said was so outlandish that Europeans from every corner of that continent came through and packed this man up in the comment section as per usual. It was a very delusional take, wild assumption. And this went a lot more in depth than I ever could have expected. If you guys are new to the channel, welcome. If you guys are returning viewers, welcome back. We are aggressively trying to hit 1 million subscribers, and I really appreciate your support. So if you could be so kind as to liking this video and subscribing if you haven't already, I'll be forever in your debt. So what are the financial norms in your country? Like, is it a flex to brag about how much money you have, how much money you spend? Is it more of a flex to save money and accumulate wealth over time? How popular are credit cards and loans in your country? Is that really a thing that many people use? Or is that less of a thing in where you reside? Because I know it depends on the country within Europe, but I know that is a massive thing across the United States. We love our loans and we love credit cards because the one thing they have in common is it's money that's not ours that we are able to spend. Now, the post in question is this post here. It says, let's be very clear. The European middle class is not traveling to the United States. They can't afford it. These are rich Europeans traveling and being amazed at the wealth of the American middle class. European middle class earns 2,200 euro monthly. After expenses, they have 500 euro a month left at best. This is nowhere near enough disposable income to go on a multi-week trip to the United States. The middle class Europeans stopped being able to travel internationally years ago. Massive, massive, massive misconception. And I saw this almost immediately, as well as many other people. This post absolutely blew up and a lot of people responded to this. My take on this initially was there is a strong cultural misconception with how the funds are spent throughout Europe and how they're dispersed and distributed and spent in the United States. Now, for the average American that goes out and works and earns their money at their job, we keep most of our money. Yes, not a lot of our money is as taxed heavily as it is throughout Europe, but a lot of that money that does get taxed throughout Europe does go back into the infrastructure and people are able to benefit off of various things as a result. The very things that they benefit from, guess what? Us Americans have to pay for out of pocket. So when we look at our take home for the disposable income of the average American household, it doesn't seem to be that high, but I could be wrong. Maybe we're swimming in so much money and so little debt that it doesn't matter. But the statistics don't really reflect that, do they? This creates a common misconception with us Americans that a lot of Europeans have an infinite money pool. They're able to travel all over the place and they have tons and tons and tons of money for whatever reason. And in actuality, it's just they were able to budget and effectively save money for these vacations that they take. And that's a normal thing. I just feel like we have a ton of issues in the United States, and one of them is consumerism. We love buying shit, okay? We love buying shit in mass. We love deals. We love everything that falls under the title of consumerism. We can't stop buying shit. And that's also a thing globally, but I feel like it is very strong in the United States in particular and adds to the impulsive spending that a lot of us Americans partake in when it comes to pulling out loans and pulling out copious amounts of credit credit cards and driving up our debt to a point where it is diabolical. The European middle class is not traveling to the US. They have more sense than that. I beg to differ. Have you seen the World Cup? Now, I know it's not the entire European middle class, but there were definitely a lot of people that traveled over to the United States to see this World Cup, and it has been very entertaining. Now, I understand there are a lot of amazing things to appreciate about the United States, especially at a time like this, but it does not change the reality that the United States is going through a lot right now. We are going through a lot. Please send us as many positive vibes as possible, because I feel like this arc is going to get very wicked after the World Cup is over. I imagine that they're seeing Europeans from all socioeconomic classes, but are mistaking them for rich because they are cultured, educated, multilingual, respectful of their hosts, not outwardly racist or boorish, and have money to spend, which goes against the whole communist Euro poor peasant view they have of us. We have been brainwashed in so many ways, it's not even funny anymore. And it's crazy when we see other political systems that work in other countries, other government systems that actually work, that differ from the government system that works in the United States. And we're like, huh? How is that possible? How are the people thriving over there? That doesn't make any sense. I mean, in the last 10 to 20 years, we've seen so many drastic changes across the globe that it's not outlandish for other people to be living just as well as people in the United States are living, if not way better. You know what I mean? And it's different. There's a lot of things that people have to take into account when it comes to personal values, right? When you think of the phrase quality of life, what does that look like to you? Let me know in the comments. What does the phrase quality of life mean to you? Because for a lot of us Americans, we think of quality of life as the ability to make a ton of money, provide for friends, families, and what have you, have a nice house, maybe a cool car, whatever, but ultimately having secure employment where we're able to make a ton of money. But if you listen to that, it's the dream of working. Not retiring, working. We have a crazy philosophy in the United States where we live to work. Our whole life is work. And it's unfortunate. And the quality of life, when you take that phrase and slap it on Europe, people like to relax. They love their breaks, their naps, their free time, vacationing. They love that. Now, I'm not saying Americans don't love to vacation, but the way our system is set up, we can barely take vacation. It's not even really practical for real. Some people are fortunate enough to do that, but a lot of people can't afford it. And a ton of companies don't even allow people to take the type of vacations they would like to take because they're afforded 2 weeks of vacation a year. That's criminal. But apparently it's not criminal in the United States. So, I mean, there's that. What the fuck is up with this obsession with calling Europeans poor? I think people like this have trouble grasping that the gap between America and the rest of the world has closed a lot over the past 10 to 20 years. You can live like you do in America in more of the world than you could back then. And that's precisely what I'm saying. A lot has changed, the economies have shifted, and America seems to take pride in tanking its own economy. So a lot of the world is in a much better spot than it was before. But of course, under these circumstances, there's a lot of diabolical stuff happening globally where all of the economies are taking kind of a wild hit right now. So maybe they aren't doing that great. It's cope. Everything is going to shit in the US, so they have to tell themselves that the closest comparable demographic has it much worse than them in order to accept their failing republic. It's the old standard American behavior. Even Nazi Germany was impressed with Americans' domestic propaganda. Yikes, that's wild if that is, if that's true. I mean, the crazy thing is we do have wild propaganda in the United States and people get brainwashed quite easily. And again, we're so exhausted and burnt out with what's been happening. However, I will say with the World Cup being what it is, it has shined a very bright light on the United States, and we've had a sliver of positivity recently that we are basking in as long as we possibly can, considering how wild, our government has been behaving. Okay, so we're trying to soak all this in before the World Cup ends. Yep, they'll take something that America has that is objectively terrible, like really bad traffic on highways cutting through badly planned urban sprawl, and point to Europe and say that they're poor for not having it because they can't afford to drive, don't have big cities, etc. Sometimes only in America means only Americans put up with this crap because they think it's good. Hey, we're doing the best we can with what we have. We've been getting the short end of the stick for a minute, but what we've been told is our country is the greatest country in the world, and we don't have any weaknesses. So we like to propagate what we're hearing to the rest of the world, even though the rest of the world knows that that is not true. Now, there are a lot of really awesome things about the United States, tons of awesome things about the United States. Unfortunately, there's a ton of things that aren't aren't great, that need a lot of fixing. And that's something that a lot of us Americans have identified already. It just feels very hopeless with who we have running things currently. It doesn't seem like we can do much to change what's currently happening. So it's going to be a long, grueling process to get to a point where we're truly happy with what we have. But there are things to be proud of still. It's just very hard to find that in times like this when we're constantly the butt of every joke for good reason. I don't know what to tell you. As a middle-class European, the majority of people I know travel internationally for their holidays, just not to the US. I'm not sure I'd call that a disposable income problem. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if you looked at the numbers for the United States in the last few years, the tourism sharply declined because of our international discrepancies that have transpired in the last 2 years in particular. And it was not looking pretty. Most countries around the world were issuing travel warnings to the United States because of how wild we were behaving. So it's even a shocker to me that this many people were able to make it into the United States in light of the World Cup. Let's be very clear. I'm about to make a bunch of bullshit up. Seems about accurate because the original poster that cranked out that absolute stinker of a statement. Yeah, wild. I mean, he could have literally just did a little bit of research and debunked literally everything he said. He just typed it out gutturally, boom, whatever. I've done stuff like that before, not proud of it. But that's exactly what this looks like. I made some calculations with the amount I normally save from wages each month, and using the time that I could have saved for the trip for the World Cup 2026, I would have had almost $70,000 for use. And I'm not even that well paid by Finnish standards. I think I'm at the bottom of the middle class. I have no idea how much it would have cost to travel to the World Cup 2026, but I'm betting that I would have had more than enough for a couple of weeks. And that's something I wanted to highlight. One of the biggest downfalls of a lot of us Americans in the household is our addiction to spending too much money. We spend money we don't have. Our credit system is kind of wild. We take out loans and credit cards like it's an Olympic sport, and we don't know how to pay it off effectively, so it drives all of us in wild, crippling debt. It's just not effective. Now, budgeting seems to be more of a popular thing throughout Europe. Whenever I hear the discussion of finances brought up, it seems like there are far more responsible people as far as how they're able to handle their money than there are in the United States. But that could just be an inflated POV from myself personally, from what I've seen. Maybe that's not really accurate, and you guys can let me know in the comments down below. But generally speaking, how are the finances taken care of in the household in your country? Because I know that in the United States, there's this illusion that Americans are just rolling in money and rolling in all this dough. We are addicted to spending money we don't have. That is our greatest strength. It's not really a strength, by the way. You guys obviously know that, but just had to clear that up for some people out there. This is mildly infuriating since a large amount of Europeans have traveled to the US at least once. Also, USAians never leave, hardly ever have vacation because they can't afford it. I lived in the US for 35 years. Most people are living off credit and live to work. Once I moved to Europe with my family, I saw the cultural difference. Everyone takes vacations, nice vacations. Many people go to California and Miami, but also to the Maldives and Tanzania. Pretty sure it was pronounced Tanzania, but you know me, my pronunciation is not the best. Working on that. Very good point here. A lot of the illusion that we're seeing from the POV of us Americans is Europeans traveling into the United States with all this time to sit and enjoy the entirety of this World Cup, or at least most of it. And we're like, how is this humanly possible with the amount of time? With our US defaultism, we try to apply what we're able to receive for time off to other countries, and we're like, you should only have 2 weeks off every year. Like, how are you able to afford to stay here for the entirety of the World Cup? That doesn't make any sense. And then the money that they save, like, did you guys take out a loan for this vacation? Like, how are you guys affording to stay in the United States and try all this food and have all this fun with what money? How did you save for this trip? Again, not that hard if you have a structured plan and a decent grasp on your finances. But unfortunately, for most of America, that is not the case. We have the earning capacity to make a ton of money, but even the households that make a lot of money have crippling debt because they don't know how to properly manage their finances. That is a very huge problem in the United States, unfortunately. And I don't think it's going to get any better anytime soon. Imagine believing there's such thing as the American middle class. That class died when Reagan was elected president. It's so funny because I told you guys a lot, for the people that have watched my channel for years. I'm originally from Chicago, and everybody out there, right, absolutely like wrote off Reagan as the worst president of all time, which after looking into him, I understand why. There also have been a lot of people I've met after living in Chicago and other places, like, yeah, I guess Republican states that, look at Reagan as the greatest president of all time. And I'm like, why though? Why is that? What do you guys think actually? From the people who like remember Reagan's presidency and stuff from a long time ago, or have looked into the history of when Reagan was president, do you think he was a good president, a bad president? Why or why not? Let me know in the comments down below. Am I missing something? Is this not the same place that pays its service staff so little they have to depend on tips? Yep, you're right. The Dutch middle class earns about 4,000 to 4,550 euro, 3,000 euro after taxes. Modal. 2,200 is below minimum wage. Anyone having less than 500 euro a month disposable income is counted as in poverty. Yeah, this was an easy statistic to look up. I mean, the original poster had like no desire to look for any accuracy when he made this statement. His one brain cell was overworked and cranked out that goofy ass statement. Americans might earn more, but the out-of-pocket expenses that they have to pay pretty much makes them less financially well off and insecure. And that's exactly what we covered earlier in this video. A lot of us Americans don't have as much disposable income because a lot of the basic necessities that other countries just have as a normalcy that are covered by the government, we as Americans have to pay for out of pocket. So one of the biggest copes, and you guys can let me know what you think about this statement in the comments down below, one of the biggest copes that us Americans make all the time when it comes to universal health care, whenever it gets brought up, we're like, universal health care? But how long do they have to wait to get an appointment? How effective is the service over in their country if they're having universal health care? I would never want that. I'm fine paying $900 a month for my medical care and also having to foot a diabolical bill on top of that. How does that even sound to somebody from the outside looking in on the United States? They did an interview with an England fan on BBC, and he was conspicuously working class. He'd been financially responsible and saved for 4 years since the last World Cup to attend this one. They're not rich, they're just overzealous and somewhat imprudent football fans. Yeah, and I don't think I mentioned this before, but it's not like they're taking vacations like this all the time. You know what I mean? Like they're spending like racks on racks on racks every single trip. Part of it is budgeting. I mean, the budgeting throughout Europe is pretty pristine from what I've heard. Now, if you guys think that I'm wrong, let me know in the comments down below. And just say that if you grab the average American and the average European, likelihood is the average European might be a little bit better with finances than the average American. And that's just me making an observation. It could obviously be wrong. We're not amazed by your wealth. We're amazed by your greed. Your plate's full of 3 days worth of food. Why you think it's necessary to have churches as big as shopping centers? Why you think it's acceptable to sell guns in grocery stores for children to shoot each other? And why anyone would need a jar of pickled eggs that's the size of a mini fridge? We're not amazed at your wealth. We're amazed at your absurdity. Also makes sense. Like I said, the original poster that made this was obviously brainless when he posted this post. Not a singular thought went into creating this, and I think he thought he was cooking, and he wasn't. So what are your thoughts and feelings on all of this? Obviously, this is very insane, very crazy, but when you look at financial culture between the United States and the entire continent of Europe, it's very different with how people manage their finances, how they manage their money and stuff like that. One interesting thing that I did learn about over the past few years is how Americans flex their wealth versus how Europeans, quote unquote, flex their wealth, their finances and stuff like that. In the United States, we brag so much about how expensive our things are. Oh, my car is $70,000. I spent $70,000 on this through a loan, by the way. I bought this watch for $20,000 on a loan, by the way. And then a lot of Europeans will be like, oh, I saved this much money on this item that cost this much money. Like this cup was 16 euro, but I got it for 3 euro. What a flex. And I'm like, oh shit. And it's just like the conversation around money, it varies from country to country in Europe, obviously, but depending on where you are at, for the most part, people seem to be a little bit more conservative when it comes to the topic of finances and whatnot. And they're not so much like flashy. There's not a whole lot of people running around bragging about how they got like 40 Rolls Royces and tons of Rolex watches and how they're going into crippling debt because they're spending all this money on things they don't need. Not saying that people aren't financially irresponsible throughout Europe as well. I mean, there's financially irresponsible people all over the globe. But if we were to look at what social norms are, it seems like the social norm in the United States is to boast about how much money you've spent that also was not your money and basically signal boost that you are also in crippling debt.